So, welcome to everyone at the next lecture of our continuing education series done by Seven Community in partnership with the wonderful Photo Wings, to whom we're very grateful to support this program and all these lectures. So, today we will be talking to Marc Prüst. He's a researcher, editor, and curator based in Amsterdam, and he collaborated, I think, with a very different initiative in his like professional career, including, I think I remembered World Press Photo, Prix Pictet, Lens Culture, among many others. And he's also a lecturer at Moholy-Nagy University in Budapest. And as I shared with you on our Discord server, you could already see Mark in quite a few lectures organized by former Seven Insider and now online platform of the Seven Foundation, mainly speaking about his two books that he published as an outcome of, I think, Mark, your research and your kind of dedication to the medium. So the first book called Tell Your Story, where you looked a little bit more into marketing, business models for photographers. And then the second book that you presented last year in a discussion with our contributing photographer Espen, called How to, well, Edit Your Story, where you talked about really how to edit. And I approached Mark with kind of a request to speak a bit more about branding and marketing for photographers, but we decided to kind of zoom out a little bit and to really dedicate this lecture more to networks, professional networks in photography. Why are they relevant? How do we connect to people? Who are the people probably that we should be, or you could kind of connect in the industry? Who are your clients, or who are your kind of potential clients? And I think what was interesting, Mark, when listening to you also, who is really the audience for the stories that our photographers tell. So I think also from the audience comes a little bit who is your client. I think it's also
Yep,
very, very connected to
indeed.
that. So this was, yeah, my very brief introduction. We're very happy to have you again at our events. So I'll really just leave the stage to you, and I would just encourage everyone. I see there's a very lively kind of not debate, but there's a lot of you greeting us here in the comments, so I'm very happy about that. If you have questions for Mark, please just post them in the comments, then we will check them later after the lecture. And if some of you will want to join us in the discussion, we will be also able to promote you to panelists, so you can ask Mark questions perhaps in person, so in video, so we see each other. So Mark, yeah, now it's time for your lecture. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Nika. Thank you so much. Let me just hit this. And then I think you should be seeing my screen. Professional networks in photography, building connections for growth. Thanks everyone for joining this lecture. I'm really excited to be here. It's always a great pleasure to work with the Seven Foundation and all their partners and their supporters. And I'm really happy that so many of you have chosen to join the lecture. So indeed, my name is Marc Prüst. Let me shortly introduce myself. Thanks, Nika, you've already properly introduced me, but I would like to say first that I'm not a photographer. I've never worked as a photographer or even trained as a photographer, never had that ambition at all. If you've seen my previous lectures, I always mention this because I think it's actually quite relevant for you to understand that taking photographs, taking pictures is not something that I do or strive to do. I'm not able actually to take decent photographs. I do have a long career in photography. I've been working in photography for the past 25 years. But I have a background in political science. That's what I'm trained to be in international relations. Indeed, I worked at World Press Photo. I worked at the French agency Agence Vue, and since 2010, I work as a freelance curator, educator, and researcher. I published these few booklets on photographic projects and editing, and I've also recorded a series of webinars on photographic stories. And I will share the links to those webinars and where you can purchase those books if you so wish at the end of the lecture. But for this lecture, I would like to warn you a little bit, because I'll be using some of the information that I shared in my previous lectures for the 7 Foundation. So if you've seen those, you might recognize some elements. If you haven't seen those, nothing to worry about. It's not like crucial knowledge, but I will be kind of building on that knowledge that I shared in those previous lectures, mostly on branding and marketing. Why is networking important? I think a network is very relevant because I think our photographic business, is built on connections and cooperations. In this presentation today, I'm focusing on provider-client relationships and less on production cooperative relationships. Many of the things I will mention will make sense in that context too, but I'm really focusing on how you as a photographer are providing services to a particular client, and not how you use your network to identify people to cooperate with on a certain project, how you find a writer or something like that. It's really in this kind of more hierarchical relationship, if you will, towards a client or a potential customer. Let's discuss this word network, right? Which I found is a term that is interpreted by a lot of people in very different ways. What we're not going to discuss, or at least not extensively, is how you drink white wine at opening receptions. I don't actually drink alcohol myself. I rarely attend openings or receptions. I'm an introvert. I don't really like crowds of people, but still, I think networking is really important, and I do a lot of networking myself, but I don't actually go to openings to do it. What I think networking is not, it's not trying to break through some kind of invisible barrier to reach that one curator or that one editor who will show your work and you are then suddenly successful, right? That's not how I think it works. What I would like to discuss, sorry, now something went wrong here, and I don't know what. Hold on. Oh, and I think we're back. Sorry about that. We will discuss what a network is, why building and maintaining a network is relevant within a photographic business, and I also try to give some kind of analysis on how networks in photography work, what they look like, how they can function. If you have questions at the end of this session, just put them in the chat as Nika explained, and we'll get to those later. Here's a quote by a Hungarian researcher who I think now lives in the United States, from his book, The Formula. And in this book, he aims to describe universal law for success. Well, I'm not really sure about that, but in this quote, I think he has a point. Performance drives success, but when performance can't be measured, networks drive success. If I translate this quote for photographers, I think it says that performance is the quality of your photographs, the quality of your pictures, your stories, your research, your writing. And of course, as a photojournalist, all those elements combined. Because if your work is not good enough, if you're not capable of actually producing relevant journalism or decent photographs, there really is no point, right? I mean, you got to be good enough, let's say, to actually make it into this market. The problem with the photographic business, with photography, is that we cannot objectively measure what is good or even what is better, right? If you're in a running competition, like physically running, it's very clear, it's measurable, right? The faster runner is the winner. If you the one who passes the finish line first wins. Even if the margin is very small, it's very clear who is the winner, who is number two, and who comes in last. We can't measure the quality of photographs in such a way. That means that we need to find other ways of measuring. We'll get to that in a bit. But it also means that if the quality of your work, the quality of your performance cannot be measured, something else will be the measure of your success. And according to Barabasi, this Hungarian researcher, it's the quality of your network that will determine your success, and not the quality of your work. So, what is a network? In fact, it's this total of connections between people and institution. You could make a drawing of all the people, all the institutions that you know, how you connect them and how they are connected to each other, whether there is a direct connection or if there is someone in between which makes that person only one handshake away, or maybe two handshakes away. The network is what connects you to the others: photographers, institutions, curators, picture editors, etc. For each individual, this picture would obviously look very, very different if you were to indeed draw it. Networking, if you put it as a verb, is in fact building these connections, creating more connections between yourself and different players. It's not rocket science, but it's good to have this terminology clear, I think. Photography, as you all know, is a practice. I'm assuming that most of you are practitioners, you're photographers, you are in the practice of photography. But photography is also an industry, right? The photographic industry has people with different positions that are active as freelance or within institutions, and who are not necessarily practitioners. So we can distinguish different positions next to the practitioner, right? Positions such as photographers or editors, curators, art buyers. And I want to look closely at some of the roles that we can distinguish or that exist within the industry, and all the different roles that we can identify within a photographer's network, including myself. I'm not a practitioner, I'm not a photographer, but obviously I also have a position. My position is that of editor, curator, researcher, whatever you want to call it. Okay, but I want to look not so much at positions, but I want to look at roles. What are the roles that people play within this industry? And I have this slide here, which in some form or other I've shared in other presentations, so you might recognize a bit of this. Again, I'm not focusing on positions of people, but the role that those people and institutions play within the industry. So I'm going to start with image providers. That's amongst that you yourself as photographers, but image banks are also image providers. Generative AI can also be an image provider. I mean, we can have this whole discussion whether that's photography or not, and I definitely don't want to go there, but it's good to imagine already that that's where this industry might be going, that you are actually in some kind of competition together with generative AI and other photographers. But obviously, that's only one role that we can identify within the industry. We also have intermediaries, influencers, promoters, buyers, the audience. Okay, let's go through all of these roles one by one. Sorry, a quick drop of water. The intermediaries. Intermediaries are those people, institutions that have a stake in your development. For example, galleries or agencies. A good gallery, a good photo agency has a stake in your development. If you grow, if you become a better, more successful photographer, if you sell more work, they will also become more successful because they actually take a part of your income. If you sell an assignment, they get 20, 30, 50, 60% of the sales price. So they are interested, they have a stake, and they have a need to develop you as a photographer. They're intermediaries, they're in between you and the client, and they kind of grow with you. Now you also have influencers who give you credibility. I'm not talking necessarily about those people on Instagram that sell their postings to the highest bidder, but in a way it's similar, because, for example, if you have an exhibition somewhere, or you publish a book, and somebody very influential, like the photo critic at the Guardian, or the art critic of the New Yorker, says that this production is really good and this photographer is like the new star on the block, that gives you a lot of credibility. That person won't have a stake in your development. They won't make any more money by saying that you are a good or a bad photographer. But that kind of positive review, or that kind of attention given by that influencer, can give you a lot of credibility. So we can look at curators, we can look at critics, but also institutions. If you have an exhibition at a certain museum, just having the fact that you have that exhibition, the fact that you are shown in that magazine, the fact that you have a picture on the front page of that particular newspaper, can actually give you a lot of credibility. Then we have the promoters. They introduce your work to their specific audience, like festivals or even some magazines. They don't have a stake in your career, and they might not even be interested in who you are or whether you grow as a photographer. But a festival, and there's nothing wrong with this, of course. I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but a festival, if they show your work, don't want to elevate you or your work. No, they have the need for content. They need people, they need work to show to their audience. And that doesn't necessarily do you any good, because if that festival is on the other end of the world, there'll be a lot of people looking at your images, but they're not necessarily buyers of your work. You won't necessarily be able to sell any work to them. So it's great to have that audience, it's great to have that recognition, but it only works if you're able to make that audience your audience, if you make that audience and kind of transform them into your clients. Anyway, we'll get to that in a little bit. I hope I'm making sense. And then we have the buyers, people who actually are willing and able to pay to use or show your work. Corporations, NGOs, consumers, collectors, magazines, newspapers, media people. I mean, the list is endless, and really depends on where you stand as a practitioner, who you are as a photographer. The buyers, they are the crucial people, obviously, if you are talking about this within a market kind of perspective. Then there is the audience, the people that will read your images, that will see your work, right? The buyers of the magazine, the visitors of your museum, the people who will interact with your work at the festival, the audience. Now, the point of this, if we identify all these different roles within a particular photographer's network, is to identify who is who. And where do you want to go with your work? Do you want to, why are you in this business? And I think you have to be very open and honest about it, at least towards yourself. Are you in this business because you want to make money, because you have to make money, which is what I'm assuming most of us, even myself. I mean, I'm in this business because I love doing what I do, but also because I actually need to make money. I'm not, I don't have a trust fund. I don't have a very rich wife or very rich parents. I actually need to pay the mortgage and buy food and everything else. So I'm in this business also so I can make money, which means I need buyers. I need clients to pay me. And so it will be very similar for most of you. However, if you do have a rich spouse or rich parents, or you just won the lottery, you might not need buyers. You might just want to look for an audience. That's totally fine. But they need different approaches, different strategies to achieve what you want to achieve. My point with this slide is that it sometimes seems to me a lot of photographers are actually happy when they receive an audience. They have they're at this festival. A lot of people see their work, and that's kind of where they stop working. My point is that it matters to get to the buyers for most of us. You want people to actually buy and pay work, but it's not a direct line. That's where the network comes into play. You might need intermediaries. You might need influencers. You might need promoters to actually get to the buyers. The tricky thing with this listing and dividing these people up into these roles, they're not so clear cut. It's not always clear who is what, because an influencer or even a promoter, so a person who's not necessarily interested in the development of your career, might actually pose as an intermediary, right? A magazine might come up to you and say, "Oh, this is great exposure for you. We really want you to create work. We really want to introduce your work to our audience." So they might present themselves as an intermediary or even an influencer, but they might just, in brackets, just be a promoter. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think it's really important to understand who plays what role and how you can use that or kind of apply that role to your career, to making the connections that you need to build. And why is this relevant, right? Because previously, or just now, I said that networking is not about trying to break through this barrier and meet that one curator or that one editor, right? The person who is able to make or break careers, the gatekeeper, as they used to be known. And many of these roles, these influences and these uh, intermediaries are often seen as gatekeepers, and that's an interesting thing, because they're seen as people who block the entry into a certain kind of institution, right? This almost mythical figure you see at a distance, and it's someone who holds the power to make or break a career. It's the picture editor deciding who gets an assignment, the curator who appoints the artist that gets an exhibition. But in fact, there's been a lot of research into this system of gatekeeping, and it turns out that gatekeeping is not a random thing, purely based on the personal preference of a certain person, a certain gatekeeper at a certain institution. There is actually this system that we call collective gatekeeping. Collective gatekeeping by a group of people, and it's these people are people within, and I mention here the art market because that's where this research comes from. And that's why I'm mentioning it here on this slide. So it's this group of people within the art market that have credibility. Artists, teachers, gallerists, museum directors, curators, editors, publishers, those kind of people. They know each other. They form, and I'm repeating myself here, but they form a network together. They know each other, but not only that, they speak the same language. They often agree. Their circle provides validation, right? They are part of that same network, and they kind of monopolize the discourse. These are the people that collectively define what qualifies as good work, but they also qualify. They also define together who qualifies as publishable or printable. Yeah, so as I said, this is a research that comes from the art world, but I think it seems to be functioning similarly in the world of media and publications, right? It's this group of people that see each other and meet each other at certain kind of events, right? They kind of speak the same language. They are part of the same social group. They are pretty tight knit, but they also keep a clear. They know what they're doing from each other, right? So they know that magazine is publishing this. They know that gallery is working on that kind of show. But they decide together what is the terminology that is being used. They decide who is the latest find within the industry. And yes, this comes from an art market research, but I've been on myself on juries several times as a member or as a chair. I also worked at the Wilpers Photo Foundation, where I actually saw the jury working. I wasn't part of the jury, but I was one of the staff, making sure that they would see all the images, and I was there listening in on their conversations and their discussions. And indeed, what was striking is that juries seem to agree quite quickly who should win. And they might not agree on the top winner, but they usually agree on the top 3 or 4, right? Because they speak the same language, because they are kind of looking for the same kind of thing. So there is not a big discussion on, let's say, the top level. And they base that on their common language, their common shared knowledge, let's say. I'll come back to that in a little bit. But within this world of collective gatekeeping, it's not really the point to try and convince that one person or to keep attacking that one editor at every opening event with your portfolio. These opening receptions or these meetings are actually a great opportunity, if you look at it that way, to understand what is being discussed, what issues, styles, approaches, or ideas are currently considered relevant within a specific market that you are active, that you want to be part of. And it can help you to understand how your work can fit into that constellation. Another thing that's relevant to understand is that collective gatekeeping functions a lot based on validation and reputation. That's what I put on this slide here. Most people are insecure, even if they don't show it, but most people are actually insecure and do not rely on their own judgment. And then you also have to realize that the person that is likely to hire you is not the person who's making the final decision, right? The person that is hiring you needs to convince somebody who's on top of them, right? Their boss. So you kind of have to give them the arguments, the justifications why you are the right person to be hired, to be given this assignment. You won an award, you had the right education, you're part of the right group, you're a 7 alumni. So get your work validated so that within this group of collective gatekeeping, it becomes known that, hey, that person actually is a 7 member or is a 7 alumni. Hey, that person had won this award. Hey, this person actually published the book with that publisher. All these kind of validating, and that makes it easier to be discussed within that group of collective gatekeepers. But it also helps the person who is considering to hire you to say, well, I'm hiring this person because I'm quite sure they are good enough, because they won this award, because they had this education, etc. I hope that makes sense. This all has to do with the market, right? And the functioning of the market. Again, this is not rocket science, but I'm trying to introduce some kind of different way of looking at how our industry functions and how you can find your place in it. And anyway, the market, right? I'm taking the economic approach right now, and a market is a place where buyers and sellers meet. That's a very simple definition of a market: place where buyers and sellers meet. However, a market can only function correctly if, and that's on the slide indeed, if there's a consensus on the criteria of quality, and both sellers and buyers are in a position to evaluate this quality. Okay, that may sound very vague, and if it doesn't sound vague, you can stop listening for a minute. But for example, if you want to buy a coffee, you go to a cafe. There is a marketplace, right? I mean, there's a buyer and there's a seller, and we meet. And I order a coffee, and if the coffee is cold, then I can actually say, sorry, my coffee is cold. And the bartender will say, oh, that's a problem. I'm really sorry. I'll make you a new one. We agree on the criteria of quality. If I order a coffee, it should be hot and it should be bitter. If I order a coffee and I taste it and say, "Ooh, but sir, this is a very bitter drink," he will say, "Yeah, but I'm sorry, that's coffee we have." But we can agree that a good coffee is both hot and bitter. We can agree on the criteria of quality. We can both evaluate this quality. And that's not really clear with photography. Remember the first slide that I showed about the Barabasi quote that we cannot measure performance, because indeed we are not clear what criteria are actually at play within the markets of photography. I'm calling it markets of photography. I don't think there's only one market of photography. I think there's several ones that we can distinguish. For example, I would say that in the stock photography market, the criteria are actually quite clearly defined. But in other markets, the buyers, the editors, and the sellers, in this case photographers, are not always in agreement about which criteria apply. Understanding what is being discussed within the collective gatekeeping community is also about understanding the criteria that they use to define what makes quality, if that makes sense. Together, they kind of define what is relevant today, what they are looking for. In a way, they are discussing, they decide amongst themselves what they see as the main, as the important criteria of the moment. And you might like it, you might not like it, but this is kind of the constellation that you work in as a photographer. And a challenge for the average photographer is how to make connections to allow you to create a network and understand how this functions, right? So let's look back at all those different roles within a photographer's network. Right, so a photographer network consists of other photographers and any other image makers, image bank, etc. And I don't want to repeat myself, but in a way, I do want to repeat myself, because repetition works. When you're building connections, when you're trying to reach out to these intermediaries, to these influencers, to these promoters, to help you make that step to identify the buyers or to make connections to those buyers. It seems that you need, if you're building a new connection, if you're creating a new connection, you need 7 points of contact. 7 points of contact. That does not mean that you write 7 emails with the same text, because that's called spamming, but it's trying to find 7 different moments in time to connect to a certain person or a certain institution. In advertising, we see the same brand on TV, in print, online, billboards. It's the same with a photographer. It's the meeting at the opening reception. Then you follow it up with an email. You exchange on Instagram. You meet them again in a portfolio review, etc., etc., etc. You're trying to build a relationship with a new person, and that takes time and effort. And you got to realize that relationships are often built on trust, on shared values, on shared work ethics. And that brings me to my next point of field and habitus. Well, there was a French sociologist, Pierre Bourdieu, you can forget the name, who tried to introduce these terms to define social groups. Field, according to Bourdieu, a field is a theoretical description of a community defined by a common definition of what constitutes capital. So within a certain field, and I'll get back to this in a moment, but if we all agree that for what a good let me get back. Let me leave that for now. I'll get back to the field in a bit. First, I want to focus on habitus. What's a habitus? The habitus is the environment where one feels their values are shared, expressed in common attitudes and behaviors. Okay, that's a very theoretical approach, or a very theoretical description. Here I'm back in the screen again, so you can actually see who's talking. Field and habitus are connected, and I use this idea of fields in my research in identifying different definitions of quality or criteria, and I use that different definition of criteria to identify different theoretical photographic fields. I'll leave that aside for now. I want to focus on this idea of habitus. We all feel most comfortable in a certain habitus, in this area. It's a theoretical description of a social group, right? So when we are with friends or with our family and we interact with the people we often work with, we know we share the same values. We know what things to discuss, what to say, how to say it, what to eat or drink, which jokes we can share, etc. We understand the others, and that's very important, we feel confident that the other understands us. We feel at ease. Normally, and again theoretically, your existing network comes from your current habitus. Even if new people enter into your habitus, like a new colleague or a friend of a friend, it's relatively easy to connect because you share the same values, right? They come into your circle, into your habitus, and they can be very valuable connections. I mean, it's very important, and there's nothing wrong. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, those can be very valuable connections. But there is a challenge that if you want to expand your network into other circles, into different circles. And often when we're expected to enter into these different habituses, other circles, we feel a bit ill at ease. I mean, I work in the cultural sector, or in the media sector, and if I'm suddenly at this event where there's all these bankers, I feel a bit insecure because they're all wearing ties and very expensive suits, and here I am with my black shirt. It doesn't necessarily connect. It's about stepping outside of your comfort zone. It's not the easiest thing, but it's also about practicing. And it's this awareness, hey, I'm in a different habitus. Okay, I might feel ill at ease. At the same time, if this is where I want to go, what can I do to actually adapt to this new habit? I've spoken about, and this all has to do with you as a photographer, right? You as a practitioner, within your field of practice. How do you fit in? How can you make connections? How can you distinguish between different roles, different people? How do those kind of people fit in this idea or concept of collective gatekeeping? What's your habitus? What habitus would you seem relevant to grow into or to connect to? Is it important to adapt to a different habitus? It doesn't mean that people are different, that you can't share the same values, or maybe the values are slightly different, but if you understand the values of others, it's easier to adapt to that habitus. And they will also say, hey, you need to convince other people that indeed you might come from a different background, but you do share the same values. At the end of the day, we're all fairly similar. It might take some time, but there is an opportunity there. That's about you and your network and how you as a person, as a photographer, how that role fits into that bigger picture. Something else I would like to address, and that's the network of your work. Of course, it's important where you fit in as a person, but it's even more important to understand where your photographic work fits in. And that's where this idea of fields by Pierre Bourdieu actually comes into play. Maybe I should quickly go back. So a field is a theoretical description of a community defined by a common definition of what constitutes capital. Let me go down to my notes. Yes. So in my understanding of this theoretical field, we can distinguish different photographic fields by defining or identifying the criteria that are applied in a decision to publish a photograph. Me, I'm very interested as a researcher. I'm very much interested in the circulation of photographs. I can talk for hours about that. I won't do that because we're talking about networking. But for me, the fact, I mean, it's great that you produce work, and it's very relevant. Of course, if you don't produce work, then all else fails. But this moment where a photograph goes into circulation, when it becomes published, and published can mean on the internet, in a magazine, in a museum, in a book, but when it's shared, when it circulates, that's a crucial moment for photography. And I'm really interested in trying to understand what are the criteria by which people decide when to publish a photograph, whether they are you as a photographer, you make you do a shoot, you have 400 photographs, and you want to put an edit online on your website, you only show 10, maybe 12 photographs. Why those 10, 12 photographs? What are the criteria that you are knowingly or unknowingly applying to those images to publish them? Then you send them to your client, and then the magazine might publish only 2 of those photographs. Why those 2? Why not the other 388 that you also photographed? So that's what I'm interested in. And by identifying these criteria that are being applied, I think we can start to distinguish different photographic theoretical fields. And let me just quickly go back to what I said before about collective gatekeeping. Obviously, these criteria explicitly or implicitly are also being discussed within that collective gatekeeping community, because they kind of decide together what they feel are the most relevant or the most important things to look for work before they publish something. I've done research into this, and I'm going to quickly share some of the fields that I've identified and the criteria by which they are, kind of how I found them, the criteria that I think they apply, and how I can then group them together as a field. So these are some of the different fields, or these are the different fields. Let me give a first nuance that these fields concern the circulation or the usage of a photograph at a specific point in time. It's not to define the photographer or to put you in a certain box or to limit how we see or use photographic images. It's a way to understand how the industry functions, and it's very theoretical. And I hope I can make it practical as we go along. Because a photograph can exist in different fields at different times. It's not so much about the photograph and more about the people and the criteria they apply when working with photography, right? So I hope I've made myself clear in this sense. I'll quickly go through all these different fields and the criteria that I think are being applied. Within visual arts, being innovative, autonomous, and rare are kind of like the most important criteria. In photographic fine art, it's much more, has less to do with being innovative and more about decorative and aesthetic qualities. In what I call autonomous narrative, it's the urgency and relevance of the work for your audience. And I think I'm assuming, again, I don't know who's actually in the audience. I haven't seen your work. I'm not even commenting or referring to your work, but I'm assuming that many of you are in the autonomous narrative field. It's the field where photographers create their own work. They initiate their own projects, and they have their autonomous, that makes it autonomous. And it's not about a single photograph, but it's the aim of telling a story, the aim of creating a group of images that together brings out a story, right? People call it documentary, but for me, it's not about whether it's actually fully the reality that you're talking about, or whether you've applied Photoshop or not. Those are important elements in different aspects, but it's about the urgency and the relevance of the story you want to tell. And I think many of you are in this kind of autonomous narrative field. Social photography, you might be doing that as like wedding photography or birth photography. It has to be very indexical, right? You want to recognize the person who's on the photograph. It has to be relatable. It has to be memorable. A wedding couple isn't looking for some kind of experimental photographic practice. they just want a great memory of their most special day, right? And they want to see that grandma was there and that the sun was shining, and it has to be relatable, memorable, and lexical. That's the criteria by which good social photography is being judged. Applied. A lot of news and commercial and illustration is applied photography. It needs to be communicative. It needs to be very effective, right? Nobody is really interested whether you used a very specific camera and a specific way of lighting. If you're photographing news, if you're photographing hard news, it needs to be communicative, needs to be effective, needs to be pretty direct. Stock photography needs to be generic, multi-purpose. Meaning is contextual and highly symbolic. I can talk for hours about stock photography because I think it's fascinating. I won't do that. It's not what we're talking about today. Heritage photography, to just wrap up this listing, it's about cultural historical value, unicity, right? It's let's call it old photography from the good old days that represents our history and our culture. And scientific photography is about technical perfection. It's like medical photography, right? It's not really about how, if it's properly lit, it has to be recognizable because a doctor has to be able to make a diagnosis. So that to wrap that up. What I think is relevant for you as photographers, as journalists, is I believe that an awareness of these criteria can help you understand how your work will be viewed. And that if your work was published in a magazine or as a stock image, it might not be necessarily considered as an art piece by someone leafing through the pages of that magazine. If it's published as a stock photograph, it's published because it's multi-contextual, but it will not be exhibited as an art piece because it's not considered innovative, and vice versa. What I'm trying to say is that if you're aware of the criteria that are at play in your specific work, if you're aware of the criteria by which your work will be judged, it can help you to find the right words by which to present yourself, but also your work to the people that you want to convince, right? And networking is building these connections, not directly to the buyer, if possible, of course, but it may be difficult to get out to that buyer immediately. You might have to go through an influencer. You might have to go through an intermediary who might actually help you. But in order to be considered by an intermediary, you have to be visible. And you might be able to use an influencer to become visible. But you want to be visible for the right reasons. Understanding the criteria by which your work will be judged allows you to contextualize your work in such a way that it can be seen and it can be noticed, can get noticed by the right people for the right ways. That what is urgent or relevant, what can be considered innovative, is something that because those are very vague terms. You can say, but Mark, that's very easy to say, because what is innovative now? And I can't actually answer that question necessarily, because what's innovative is, I think, being decided or being talked about, is being considered by that collective gatekeeping community. And how can you then find out what is urgent and relevant within your specific community and within your specific market? Is perhaps by going to that opening reception and discussing with the right people over a glass of white wine. So I'm not saying, so it's kind of paradoxical. In a way, you have to talk to these people at these openings to understand what's going on, but obviously that's not the only way. Networking is about building meaningful connections. It's about expanding your position and understanding who to connect to at what point in time and who can connect you to others. It's understanding where you can position yourself, you as a person, as a practitioner, within this group of people that all play different roles. You also have a role, your role of the practitioner, or if you're an editor, your role as an editor. How that relates to the other roles of intermediaries, of influencers, of decision makers, all those kind of people, and how your work fits into that, and understanding, using your network, using those connections to understand how your work fits into that bigger picture. I think it's crucial to understand that there are indeed these 7 points of contact that you need before people actually understand what the hell you're going on about, who the hell you are, what you are, who you are, what you want to achieve, and why you want to achieve it. In previous lectures, I've been going on and on about you have to know your story. It's about understanding who you are and what it is you want to say and how you want to say it. And again, I can talk for hours about those kind of things. We're not going to do that today because we're focusing on this concept of networking. But I do think it's relevant, and I do think it's important to understand that you have a unique position. Your story is your story. You're the only person who can tell that story. But if you only work on assignment, if you are in the business of creating images and stories for others, that's not a bad thing, not at all. It means that you have to understand what are those people looking for and what are the criteria by which my work will be judged. And the listing that I shared, I hopefully makes one thing clear. Quality is undefinable for photography. It all depends on why is it being published, why will it circulate, on what platform, and in what kind of field will it circulate. The stock photograph will be judged by different criteria than a wedding photograph will be judged by different criteria than an art photograph. If you understand those criteria, then you can actually try and contextualize your work, present your work, show your work that it fits into those criteria. If your work isn't good enough, okay, you weren't close enough, as the big Robert Capa said, I think if you're in this community of 7 Insider, your work is good enough. You know how to take a photograph. You know how to write the proper caption. You know how to attract the right people. You know how to position yourself. That's not the issue. So there will be different criteria at play for the work, for the world, for the habitus in which you want to present your work. Identifying those criteria, I think, is one of the crucial elements of networking. It's building those connections, but not just to build the connection, but to understand what it is that people actually want from you. I hope that makes a little sense. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, I would share the web links, so you can use your cell phone and go to the websites for these booklets. You can buy them there. They're not very expensive, or you can view my series on my webinar series if you're interested. And for now, I say thank you. Here's my email address if you want to get in touch. And I'm giving back to Nika and see if there are any questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Let me first unmute myself. As I said, each time it's like this. So thank you for this insight really into the kind of networks, into different aspects of that. So I think it's been very interesting. We have quite a lot of alumni here. So if you have questions, please post them. Please go back to that page. Okay, people just want you, Mark, to go back to the QR codes just so they can take
the QR
time.
code. Okay.
Yes.
Hold on. I have to. That's always a challenge, but let me give me 1 sec.
Yes.
The QR codes.
Yes. So we'll leave this for a little bit so all of
We'll
you
leave
can
this for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, take a screenshot and or scan it and already head to the pages. But if there are questions for Mark, I'll leave a few like moments just so you can write them. If anyone wants to join us in like the
2 weeks.
discussion, also that, yeah, also the workshop I'll tell about. Joya is saying that it's I'll just put it, let me see if now we can see it. It's great to hear you contextualize our existence as an ecosystem. You are always concise, thoughtful, and enlightening. So thank you,
Oh,
Mark.
thank you, thank you, thank you. Big
Joya, yeah.
words.
So yeah, Joya, thank you for this comment. It's always also a pleasure to have you at the community. Chaim is also saying thank you for the insightful presentation. If you have questions for Mark, I would say really use it. I will now, Martin Miklas is also saying, wow, thank you. It was absolutely eye-opening and mind-blowing. So it's,
Okay.
I'm happy we have lectures like this, so you're all excited and inspired. If you have questions or you want a short discussion with Mark, really just write here in the comments, because then we can add you in this wonderful kind of StreamYard for the discussion. I will just say to all of you that we will have Mark here also in 2 weeks' time for a special workshop. So we usually, we do workshops every 2 months. Sometimes they are on topics like editing, sequencing. We had writing, grant writing, stuff like that. But Mark will have a special workshop also linked to this presentation. So under the events on Seven Community, you will find more information on how to apply. I'll try to share it now, but for some reason, every time I try to do something else than have one tab open, my computer just crashes. Okay, it's
Oh, you
here.
don't want your computer crashing here, Nika. So
It's not even that old, but it just does that, decides that it's how it is. So I posted a link to the workshop in the chat. You will first obviously have to log into Seven Community to see everything that's written, but you need to apply until the Thursday, May 22nd, which is in a week time. And you will have to submit a short biography, selection of 5 to 10 images, one specific challenge or question you're facing in relation to networking or visibility, and a brief list of your goals. So, what kind of people or organizations do you want to connect to? Why do you want to connect with them? And where do you want your work to be seen or published? So, this is something that we're going to tackle in the workshop that's going to be held on Tuesday, May 27th. If you have more questions about that workshop, you can also ask Mark now. But you know that we usually select 4 to 6 alumni to join, and all of you others can always listen in. I saw quite a lot already registered because we have these workshops open for the community, so you can all learn from each other, obviously. So that's always very nice. So, more questions. I see there's over 30 of you here, which is great. But if really you want to join us, I really encourage you to do so. We always have at Seven Community, we try to promote this discussions and Q&As that are sometimes as long as the lecture itself, because it's always so nice.
I know that from experience, and
Yeah.
it's always a pleasure. I mean, I'm and feel free to ask anything that is even. There's no bad questions. There's no dumb questions. Only bad answers. So put the pressure on me, I would say, and feel free, because I'm more than happy to clarify or dive deeper into some of the elements that I mentioned.
Well, maybe a question from me to you, Mark. How did you came across all the networks? Because you're quite, I would say, probably well connected in the industry. So what was your path in this field? Obviously, you're not a photographer, but as researcher, as a lecturer, how is it for you to explore the networks? How do you see it? You're also a jury. You said a jury member in a lot of this kind of
Yeah. And I mean that's more the practical approach of this, because as I said, I don't like crowds of people. I'm a bit of an introvert. I don't drink wine, so openings are not my natural area. But I am very aware of the people that I want to meet, and what role they play within my practice, let's say. Um, and I'm also, I think, quite aware of what I bring to the table, what I am able to do. Um, so instead of talking to a lot of people at opening receptions drinking wine, I actually just, pick up the phone, make a call, and try to make an appointment. And I try to maintain my connection. So if I meet someone at a festival and we've had a nice conversation, I'll make sure to send them an email afterwards saying, "Hey, it was nice meeting you." And if I know that in 2 months' time I'll be going to a festival, I'll be sure to send them a message again saying, "Hey, I'll be at this festival. Shall we have a coffee? I would like to show you this, introduce you to that, maybe ask you a question." So it's networking is, and I actually haven't actually mentioned this, but it's mostly maintaining relationships, right? So it's also about reaching out and uh, um, not hiding behind your computer, but staying in touch with all those people. And I think there's a lot of bad ideas and concepts associated with social media, and I tend to agree. But the great thing about social media is that you can actually stay in touch with a lot of people and have that under your own control. You can publish photographs, you can publish stories, but you can also directly reach out to people and connect to them. People know what you're doing. So, and I think in the workshop that we did some time ago about professional practice, that's why I didn't go into that today, but that's where we also discuss, like, I think, what are social media? There's a way, it's a way to stay in touch with your network, with the people that you know, for the reasons that you want them to know you for. So it's not about sharing that you had a great party. No, it's about sharing that you had this achievement, and that maybe you've had a small celebration, but it's about the achievement that you want to share. So staying in touch, sending a lot of emails, going to a lot of events, talking to a lot of people. I think that has been my way of building my network, and I've tried to be conscious about building that network and looking for the people indeed that I share values with. Because if you feel very uncomfortable, if you feel that you can't have a good working relationship with someone, there's no point. And maybe they are very important. Maybe they are these big curators or whatever. But if you can't find this equal footing, if you can't find this common ground, if you're really in different habitat, to put it in the theoretical framework, I'm not able to do. I think some people are. They are able to kind of, you know, be a chameleon and change into a different habitat. I'm not that kind of person, and I don't want to be that, or it doesn't make me feel comfortable. So sometimes you talk to somebody and you kind of know, like, this is not going to work. And sometimes it takes more time, but it is an investment into relationships. It's a very long answer, but I hope it makes sense.
Yeah. No, but it's good because now I wanna Viviane has a question. She's based in Madagascar, so obviously me and you are based in Europe. For us, it's a bit
Yep.
easier to go to some festivals and to connect probably. But
Yep.
we're in this kind of online community. We Seven Community is really primarily an online community. We have alumni from 130 countries, so
That's amazing.
we mainly connect online. So Viviane is asking, I'm just gonna have the question here on the screen. So first, when it comes to working with curators, how do you approach a curator? Should you wait that they kind of select you? How to make them interesting at for the work that they are
Huh.
doing?
Yeah. Vivian, thanks for this question. Really good question. But I'm afraid there's not one answer. Um, some people, especially in the art market, it's this idea that curators want to make how do you call it? They want to make the new find. They want to make a discovery, right? It's a very romantic idea. But how do you make a discovery if you're indeed in Madagascar and that curator is in Paris? How does that work? So there is nothing wrong, I think, with approaching curators with your work, but you have to realize that in a way you want something from them, right? They at the end of the day, they also want something from you. It's a cooperation, but if you are reaching out to them, you want something from that curator, at least attention. So what do you offer? Does it make sense? Are you at, you have to be very critical, self-critical of your work. Now, Vivian, I don't know your work, right? So I'm not judging you and the level of your photography at all. But are you really at the right level to be approaching that curator? If you just come out of a photo school and you're approaching the curator of the MoMA, that might not be, in New York, that might not be a very realistic approach. So is your work at the right level to be actually exhibited? Or is there a match? Is this a curator that's interested in environmental work, if you're an environmental photographer? Or is this a curator that only works in conceptual work? Then there is no match. So identifying what your work is about, what story your work is, and is that something that can be relevant to that particular curator, that's a good way. What also helps, and I talked about validation. Validation is giving yourself the credibility, right? So within your community, have you had a publication? Have you already had an exhibition? Or maybe do you know somebody who also knows that curator? If somebody approaches me saying, hey, Mark, you should look at this work because I think it would interest you, of course I will say yes. Why? Because that person approached me. So that's already a favor there. So it's harder for me to say no if a good friend of mine says, hey, Mark, you should look at this work. So can you map and literally map the relationships towards that one curator? And can you find, if that person is only one or two handshakes away, can you create an introduction to that person? And that's where I think it's relevant to think about these different roles, right? So the curator is then potentially the buyer of your work, because that's where you want to end up, right? So do you need an influencer? Do you need a promoter? Do you need an intermediary to help you get to that point? And if you don't, then maybe that's also where you need to work, because I know that in Madagascar, you're not completely isolated from the rest of the world. There's also photographers who work for international media, who work for international platforms. Can you connect to those people? Who are the people that they know? So it's really you can jump from here to the Himalaya and be on the top of the world. That's not very realistic. You have to make it step by step, and those steps are usually or often within a smaller community, and you kind of build it from there. So how to make them interested in your work is also to be visible and to make sure that you have the right validation and you are able to make the right introductions. I hope that is an answer to your question, Vivian.
Yeah, Vivian, I hope this also answered a little bit how you introduce yourself with professionals with direct contact that you also asked. I know I will also just add here, because I know you participated in a group exhibition with photographers from Madagascar. So I think it's also very good to have this kind of community projects, because you're having like a much more expanded network as a community of photographers that you are in Madagascar. So I think that's very interesting. And because my profession basically is a curator as well, but I'm not working much as a curator in photography. I work more as curator in light art field. And it's really about just seeing work. I think seeing work in person and meeting people. So if you can just try to get more exhibitions as a group of photographers, I think it's going to always be interesting, because we tend to travel quite a lot to see the work. So yeah, trying to apply to as many kind of open calls. I know sometimes they come with a special fee, which we try sometimes with the community to have some fee waivers for certain festivals, for certain open calls. But yeah, just trying to really target the right kind of festivals and outlets and spaces for your work. But I think if
Yeah.
you apply for the workshop, Vivian, I think Mark can see more about your work, and you can maybe work on a little bit of a strategy who to kind of reach out to when he checks the work.
In general, my advice to photographers would be show your work. And of course, there's always this question like, is this a good gallery or a good space? And I know there's a cost aspect involved as well. But generally, I mean, I mentioned this quote by Barabasi, and he did this research where he literally mapped with his students graduates from art academies and where they exhibited and how their career then evolved after that. And his conclusion was very interesting, that the people who exhibited the most, and then he also made this distinction between prestigious and less prestigious spaces, but the people who exhibited the most in the most prestigious spaces, the earliest in their career, became the most successful. Whatever success, meaning he had this measurement of success. I forgot the details, and I can find the article if you're interested. And I didn't repeat the research in photography, but I do see that the photographers who are able to circulate their work in exhibitions, in magazines, in books, but are visible, literally visible through their work, that's hugely important. And I think that, again, that's kind of another workshop, but what you publish of a certain project, you don't have to show the entire project all the time. You don't have to you should not try and show the same work all the time, or the same images all the time, but publishing and being visible is crucial. It's really about circulation. A lot of photographers focus on creating more images, but my strong advice is, once you've produced a body of work, try and circulate it on as many platforms as possible, in as many different forms as possible. You have to be, well, you don't have to do anything, but if you want to be seen, make sure that your work is seen, and it will. So that is kind of connected to Vivian's question, I hope.
Yeah. We also have a question from Mumin. I will put it here. So he's asking, how do you deal with the feeling, it's related to this kind of curators discussion, that they might think you're only reaching out because you want something from them? So even if your intentions are genuine, it's hard not to worry that it might come across as transactional.
That's why I think introductions can be very useful. Because, well, and it is transactional. I think we can also be very honest about that. It is transactional. In especially in the art world. I know you're not in the art world, I said you're more in journalism, but in the art world, it's very not done to talk about money, right? Or, no, you're in it for the art, and money is kind of not discussed. I don't know if you're aware of the art world, but I don't think Damien Hirst agrees with that kind of approach. But be that as it may, it is transactional, Mumin. So you can be genuine and it can be transactional at the same time. I think it's very important to be honest about it. What do you want from that person? I think, but I'm also from a Western European context. and in the Netherlands, we are known to be quite direct and quite clear in what we ask for. However, I've also lived in Japan, and I speak the language. So in Japan, it's not very common to be very direct or confrontational. But clarity is something else. You can be very clear in why you're reaching out and what do you want from the cooperation. It doesn't have to be money. I mean, I would not worry too much about it. I think it's important to be very clear and very open. And you got to realize, and I think you've given me a very good example of this, but give the gift of a good question. It's much harder for me, because I also work as a curator, if I get a PDF, which sometimes happens, from a photographer, and there's this lot of words and a lot of text, and then, okay, but what do you want me to say? I mean, yeah, cool pictures, but what do you want? What do you want from me? So, and when I do portfolio reviews, I often ask the photographer, so what would you like to hear from me? What do you want? Why are you here? What do you want from me? And then often the photographer kind of gets nervous. Your opinion. My opinion? Why are you interested in my opinion? You're asking about my taste, but my taste is actually irrelevant. I like coffee. I don't really like tea. There's nothing wrong with tea, just don't like it. So if you are reaching out to somebody and you're able to give the gift of a good question is something that forces the other person to actually think twice and reconsider their position or their initial thoughts, then you're really onto something. Then you're engaging that person. Because building a network and building a relationship is also about engagement. If you can engage that person into the work and they can see something they can also benefit, and that's very transactional, but it doesn't have to be a money thing. But if they feel they can become involved in the project, I think that's a very important. I wouldn't call it a strategy because that sounds, again, too transactional, but it is a way to involve people and to also see if you share the same values, if you share the same work ethics, if you can work together, if you're on the same page on something like this. So yeah, that would be my answer, and I hope I answered your question here, Moomin.
I think you did, Mark. If not, Moomin, just you can have follow-up questions if you think. I think just to also add on this, I know questions are for Mark, but since I work also as a curator,
please.
I think, no, for me, because I work on very specific kind of topics. I do one festival that's linked to water and sustainability. It's really about the artist reading what we do, because I get so many proposals that have nothing to do with what are we doing, you know. So it's really to check who you are writing to, because you don't want to just make a list of, oh, this is like 200 galleries and I'm going to send them an email. Why do you want to exhibit there? What connects you, kind of, as Mark, you were saying also, what's this kind of connection that we create with these people? And how can we make some kind of synergy? So in that sense, for me, this is the most important when people approach me, artists approach me, is really this kind of common values that you also mention a lot, Mark, but it's really how can we align kind of with what we're doing, all of us.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this in a previous lecture as well, but if you apply to an open call or to a competition, if you follow the guidelines and stick to the rules that are mentioned in the open call, you're probably already part of the top 50%. Because in my experience, at least half of applications that I get in this kind of things don't even fit to the guidelines. If you say, well, maximum 10 images, there are people who send 12, people who send 50, max 300 words, people send essays of 6,000 words. I mean, I'm looking for environmental projects, and then people send me street photography projects or fashion projects. Stick to the guidelines, and you're already, just just doing that. Read the rules, sticking to them, being, committing to the deadline, sending it before the deadline, not 2 minutes before the deadline, but maybe even a day before the deadline. Definitely not a day after the deadline. Sticking to the rules will put you in the top 50%, if not higher. So that it's very obvious, but it's really true.
Yeah,
In
it's
my experience, I don't know if you can confirm that, Nika. But
exactly the same. It's funny that you mention it because also we have this procedure how people should apply for workshops at Seven Community that are not really followed. So I had to, for this workshop, I had to set the rules again. How is the submission format? Because if we would be fair, like those that are not following this kind of submission that we want, sending like a bio of this kind of words and that, like, then you wouldn't be accepted for the workshop. Obviously it's the community, so we can overlook that, but I think it's so important because, as you say, Mark, I think in my experience 40% it really falls off just sometimes with very technical things. So it's really,
and that's very simple. I mean, it's just it's a no-brainer. Stick to the rules, follow the guidelines, and then with that, and then of course there is still next steps to take, but just following those rules will put you in the top 50%.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. You also said, because I think here among the audience, we have a few people that next week we actually have our second edition of portfolio reviews. You said when you do reviews, how should people approach reviewers? What kind of opportunities for expanding the network do they present? Like, because we know a lot of our alumni attend this kind of portfolio reviews.
Yep.
You only have 20 minutes. How to make sure that you keep these people in your network?
Yeah, there's not one format, obviously, but I think it comes down to know who you're talking to. It's again, it's a bit of a no-brainer, but give the gift of a good question. Prepare a specific question for that person. What I think is really important during a portfolio review is not to present something that's finished. Present something that you are still working on. If you show me a book, I can only say, well, great book, or well, I don't like the book. But if you show me a project and you ask me like, but I'm not sure how to develop this, or I'm wondering how you see this point moving forward. You're involving me into the project. I become part of the project, and I can kind of co-own the project. That means I feel responsibility. And if, for example, you show me this, you show me a portfolio, and we have this kind of conversation, and I say, I think you should be going there, and I get the response, that's the best advice I got. Thank you so much. I'm gonna grow out of my chair and glow and feel very proud because somebody is actually taking my advice very seriously. I will remember that. I will remember as a reviewer that review. Then if 1 year from now I meet that photographer and say, oh man, that was the best advice I ever got. Thank you so much. And here's the book. I'd like to give it to you. Then I'm proud of the book as well, because it's part of what I created, right? So giving this gift of a good question, allowing the reviewer to actually give you honest advice, and you are able, that doesn't always happen, but if you're able to kind of include or adopt or adapt this advice, that's really important. That's based on your work. The other part is the personal connection. The best thing you can get from a 20-minute review is the start of a relationship. Nothing more, nothing less. If you feel that you've had a very meaningful conversation, if you feel that there was a connection, that you share something based on the work, that can be the start of a relationship. And then it's up to you, and also up to the reviewer, of course, to build on that relationship, to kind of try and develop that relationship. And that's where the 7 points of contact come in. You've had 1 point of contact. That means that next week after review, you send an email. Dear Barra, thank you so much for the review. It was a really good advice that you gave me. I'm really going to take it to heart. I'd love to keep you posted. Unlikely that you will get an answer. But you've suggested just to stay in touch. They haven't said no either. That means you can stay in touch. So a month later, you give them an update, or you send them a message on your on your Instagram, or whatever. You build on these 7 points of contact, and hopefully next year you meet them again at a review. Hey, do you remember we had that conversation? I send you a few emails. Like, very likely that person is going to say, yeah, oh, I'm sorry I didn't respond to you, but I've been following your Instagram and it's really good work. They might not respond, but they will probably see. If they don't, if they are, well, then maybe there wasn't a connection. But don't expect this 20-minute review to lead to a proposal for an exhibition. If it happens, it's great. You just won the lottery and have a party and amazing, but that's not very likely to happen. So be realistic. So one part is give a good question, involve somebody in your project. The other part is that's the photographic work, and the personal part is if you're lucky, it's the start of a relationship. Build on that relationship. I hope that is an answer to the question.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice, because I think many of the alumni here were like thinking about it. So Mumin also said, because I think he's attending, that he's grateful. These networks, there we got just a comment that these networks would be useful when you need reference letters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And I had a thought, but now I lost it. Yeah, no, actually, my question here would be, in terms of networking, when is it too much that you're asking from your contacts? Because we know, as you said now, okay, you send a follow-up and you send another follow-up, and sometimes it can become overwhelming. But what should alumni do? Because sometimes it's really, you're not getting an answer, not because people are not interested, but just because they're overwhelmed with all of this information in today's world. It's like, it's so many photographers out there. So how to not be, how to not overwhelm maybe a person you're
I wouldn't
contacting.
worry too much about that. Again, if you send the same email 7 times in a row every single day of the week, that's a bit much. But if you are staying in touch on different platforms in different ways, you send an email, you like their message on Instagram, you send a postcard. How great would it be to receive a postcard?
That's amazing.
Right? It's happened to me once or twice. Like, oh wow, you got a postcard. It's so nice. It's I think it's put yourself in their shoes, right? When do you think it would be too much? Yeah, if you keep calling them every single day, then no, that's and they don't answer, or they click you away every time. But as long as you don't get a no, if people don't block you on social media or on their mailing list, then I think there's nothing wrong with just keep sending stuff. That's my position. And sometimes I send photographers that keep sending me stuff. I'm sorry. I'm thank you for your information, but I'm actually not. I don't think it's very useful for you to keep sending me stuff, because I don't think I'll be able to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I get a lot of emails from picture editing companies that want to do clipping path, and I block them, or I send an email saying, hey, this is not my line of business, stop sending me emails. Yeah, and then often they say, oh, I actually get responses, sorry to bother you. Okay, fine, no harm done. So I would, as long as you don't get this kind of negative response, and you feel that you're being decent, I wouldn't worry too much about it. That's my.
Yeah.
That still means it's very exhausting, because if you don't get response, it feels like this black box, right? You don't know what's happening. That's the nature of this game as well, and it's also about being realistic and understanding where. That's why I think this idea of criteria and understanding where you fit in within this game, and okay, you want to show your work at Centre Pompidou in Paris. Well, okay, then either you have to be a very you have to be a dead photographer because they show historical work, or you have to be a very innovative photographer. Well, are you a very innovative? Does that fit? Do you have the right kind of credibility to do that? If not, well, you don't have to reach out to the curator at the Centre Pompidou in Paris. It's also about being realistic where you stand, and if you feel that that's where you should be and you deserve to be there, then I think you can actually set up a strategy on how you can get there. There are no guarantees, though. That's the downside of this talk.
Yeah, I
There
think
were guarantees. I would give them to you, but I can't.
And we also had nice comments from the alumni. So just to pronounce this correctly, Casey Nuacalor says that I would say, yeah, make sure that you're reaching out for the right reasons. So when sending these emails, like to share new work, to connect if you're in their city, when you buy their book or something, find something to connect you. I think that's
I totally agree.
great advice.
Great advice. Great advice.
Yeah.
And it's again, like, why are you reaching out? Right? Is it just to inform? If you just inform, I don't feel obliged to send an answer. If you ask me a question, and it's a good question, and it's a reasonable question, oh, can you give me a review of the work and propose 5 new edits? If I've never met you, that's not a reasonable question. I'm not gonna. Why would I do that? I mean, that's how I make money. You're asking it for free, and I've never met you. That's not realistic. But as Casey very rightly said, if you reach out for the right reasons and it's reasonable, then that's great. It's very good advice. Very good advice.
And another good advice is network with your peers to grow together. Some will grow into photo editors, etc. I think this is very true in this community. We have this community now for 2 years, and we've seen people transition from photography to being editors because this is what they found out through the course of their work, that this is something they are better at and enjoy more. So I think it's true. We have such a big community here. I think really try to stay really connected as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this was from the audience. I think if there's more questions, we have time for one more. Then we'll slowly have to finish. But if there's one more question, we're happy to take it. If not, I will just to those that might join. I see the audience is a bit growing again. So to those that just joined a bit later, I'll just add the link to the workshop with Marc again. Let me just open it. As we said on Tuesday, May 27th, we're gonna have a workshop with Marc. So here is the link again to kind of see the requirements to apply. Do apply. We really love this workshops. I think you also meet Marc in a different way with as kind of more educator, giving you very like personalized advice on your projects. So I think it's really, I really advise you to apply and to come to the workshop. If probably there's always a question, can you apply again? If you already attended our workshops, you can, because sometimes it really depends who applies and how many. So even if you attended already in the past, you are eligible to apply again. Also to those that were just selected for the reviews, that doesn't mean that you cannot apply for this workshop. So this is just from my side. But yeah, I think, Mark, we're gonna slowly finish for
All
today.
right.
There's
Well,
no
I think we've been very clear together and very people. So hopefully that's true. I thank you all for your attention. It was my pleasure. I enjoyed in interacting with you, and there were some great questions, some great comments, and advices also. So that's really good to hear. And I hope to see some of you in the workshop in like 2 weeks. I think it's a bit less than 2 weeks. And of course, if we meet somewhere else at an event, I'll be feel free. I mean, I don't see your name, so I really don't know who's attending. But if you say, "Hey, I was in a 7 workshop," I'll it'd be my pleasure to connect and to meet and to talk. And if I can help you, I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you, Mark, really for this. We also hope to connect in person. Mark already told me he's going to be in Aral this year. So
Yep.
if some of you here in the audience are there, you know probably already my email, just reach out. We didn't announce the community program for Aral yet. We will announce it soon. But I already know that at least 15 of our alumni are coming there. So
Wow.
if you're one of them, just reach out. We have kind of special program. And obviously, yeah, it's a good networking opportunity to be in
Absolutely.
Aarhus. So we're very happy, Mark, to meet you there. And thank you for this really brilliant lecture. And we'll be in touch, obviously, for the workshop and with all of the others. I think our next event is the workshop, and for the rest, we're gonna be in touch over our Discord that we use kind of daily. So see you there, and
Great.
Marco, thank you again.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone. Thanks again.